The baby was still breathing when they sealed the walls, its soft cries growing fainter as the concrete hardened around the makeshift tomb. A family fleeing the war zone had made the unthinkable choice, abandoning their adopted infant behind a hastily constructed false wall in their basement as air raid sirens wailed above. What happened in that suburban home outside Kiev would haunt investigators for years to come, challenging everything we understand about survival, cruelty, and the inexplicable phenomena that sometimes occur during humanity's darkest moments. The discovery came 5 days after the family's evacuation, when 32-year-old real estate developer Marcus Holloway purchased the abandoned property sight unseen through an overseas auction. Having spent years renovating war-damaged properties across Eastern Europe, Marcus considered himself hardened to the horrors that conflict leaves behind. Nothing in his extensive experience could have prepared him for what awaited in the basement of this seemingly unremarkable home. "I heard it immediately upon entering the house," Marcus later told investigators, his hands visibly trembling during recorded testimony. "A sound so faint I initially thought it was water dripping, or perhaps mice in the walls. But it was rhythmic, almost like labored breathing." Following the sound to the basement, Marcus noticed something unusual about one section of the wall. It appeared newer than the surrounding concrete, with a slightly different coloration. As he approached the wall, the sound grew marginally louder. Dr. Eliza Korge, chief medical examiner for the International War Crimes Tribunal and first responder at the scene, described what happened next in her official report. "Mr. Holloway initially believed he was hallucinating when he pressed his ear against the wall and clearly heard what sounded like an infant's weak cry. Using tools from his vehicle, he began carefully breaking through the concrete. What he discovered defied all medical understanding. Behind approximately 8 inches of hastily mixed concrete lay a small cavity, just large enough to contain a woven basket. Inside, wrapped in a military-issue blanket, was a severely dehydrated but somehow still living 6-month-old baby. Medical professionals who examined the infant were at a complete loss to explain how the child had survived 5 days without water or proper ventilation. Even more perplexing was the single item found clutched in the baby's tiny hand, a weathered military dog tag that would later become central to the investigation's most disturbing findings. The baby, temporarily named John Doe until proper identification could be established, was immediately transported to Kyiv Central Hospital's intensive care unit. Dr. Mikhail Petrov, the attending physician, initially refused to document his observations, fearing professional ridicule. "The child's vital signs were impossible," he eventually stated in a sworn affidavit. Despite severe dehydration, the infant's core temperature was normal. Despite 5 days without nutrition, blood samples showed no signs of starvation. And despite the sealed environment, oxygen levels in the blood were consistent with those of a healthy child. The medical impossibilities only mounted as additional tests were conducted. The infant's skin showed no signs of the expected tissue damage from prolonged immobility. There were no pressure sores, no muscular atrophy, no evidence of waste elimination, as if the child had somehow existed in a state of suspended animation while sealed behind concrete. 3 separate medical teams were brought in to verify these findings, each leaving more disturbed than the last. Meanwhile, authorities began tracing the family who had abandoned the child. Financial records and border-crossing data quickly identified them as Thomas and Svetlana Rourke, an American-Ukrainian couple who had evacuated to Poland as Russian forces approached their suburb. Initial interviews suggested a picture-perfect family. Thomas, a former military contractor who had fallen in love with Ukraine and its people, Svetlana, a local teacher he had met during his deployment, and their recently adopted war orphan, officially named Nikolai. What investigators couldn't understand was why this seemingly loving couple would commit such an unimaginable act of cruelty. Neighbors reported seeing the family loading their vehicle with personal belongings as air raid sirens sounded. Mrs. Dinalo, who lived next door, recalled something unusual about their departure. Thomas seemed distant, almost mechanical in his movements. Svetlana was crying, but not the way you'd expect from someone fleeing war. She kept looking back at the house and whispering something. It looked like she was arguing with herself. The investigation took a darker turn when forensic teams fully examined the dog tag found clutched in baby Nikolai's hand. The metal identification tag was significantly older than expected, dating not from the current conflict but from World War II. The name embossed on the tag, Sergeant Viktor Kovalenko, matched no records in the Rourke family history. When investigators ran the name through military archives, what they discovered sent shockwaves through the entire investigative team. Sergeant Viktor Kovalenko had indeed existed, a Ukrainian soldier who fought against Nazi occupation in 1943. According to surviving military records, Kovalenko's unit had been stationed in the exact same village where the Rourke home now stood. More disturbing still, historical accounts indicated that Kovalenko had been captured after German forces discovered him hiding several Jewish children in a concealed basement room. Both he and the children were executed at the site. How had a 79-year-old dog tag from a long-dead soldier ended up in the hands of an abandoned infant in 2022? The question became even more perplexing when soil samples taken from the tag revealed something impossible. The metal contained trace particles consistent with the exact concrete mixture used in the wall that had imprisoned baby Nikolai, as if the tag had somehow been present when the wall was constructed, despite having been documented in a military archive just 3 weeks earlier. While investigators grappled with this impossibility, baby Nikolai's condition began to deteriorate in ways that defied medical explanation. Despite receiving proper hydration, nutrition, and care, the infant's body temperature began dropping by approximately 1 degree every hour. No amount of external warming could stop the decline. Even more disturbing, medical staff reported hearing what sounded like distant whispers emanating from the child's room, even when the baby was sleeping and no one else was present. Nurse Katya Boyko was the first to notice another inexplicable phenomenon. The shadows in the room didn't move correctly, she stated in her witness account, her hands shaking so badly that another staff member had to transcribe her words. When someone walked past Nikolai's crib, their shadow would pause for several seconds before continuing. Sometimes it would move in the opposite direction entirely. After the third night, none of the night shift staff would enter the room alone. As the investigation intensified, Thomas and Svetlana Rourke were located at a refugee center in Warsaw. Their initial interview raised more questions than answers. "You don't understand what we were protecting the world from," Thomas repeated, his eyes never focusing on the investigators. "The things we saw that child do, the voices that came from his room at night, the writing on the walls in the morning." Svetlana's testimony was even more disturbing. Speaking through uncontrollable sobs, she described how they had found baby Nikolai abandoned near a destroyed hospital 3 months earlier. He was perfect, too perfect. Not a scratch on him, despite the building being completely destroyed. Everyone else was dead. What had begun as a compassionate rescue quickly evolved into something far more sinister, according to her account. "It started with the animals," she whispered. "Neighborhood pets would be found dead near our property, always arranged in circles, always facing our house." Thomas had initially dismissed these incidents as the tragic side effects of war, but both began to suspect something was wrong when they noticed Nikolai speaking in his crib at night. Not baby talk, Svetlana insisted, full sentences, in languages neither of us understood. Sometimes it sounded like Ukrainian from centuries ago. Sometimes it wasn't any language at all. The turning point came 1 week before their evacuation. Thomas had installed a baby monitor that captured audio and video. The recording, which both Thomas and Svetlana insisted was unaltered, was recovered from their phone during the investigation. What it showed defies rational explanation. The 6-month-old infant, sitting upright in his crib at 3:17 in the morning, having what appeared to be a coherent conversation with an empty corner of the room. The audio captured only one side of this exchange, Nikolai's voice, which alternated between infant babbling and what language experts would later identify as an archaic dialect of Ukrainian not commonly spoken since the 18th century. Forensic analysts examining the recording were disturbed by another detail. The shadows in the baby's room appeared to move independently of any light source, gathering in the corner where the child seemed to be directing his attention. 3 separate technical experts examined the recording for signs of manipulation. All 3 concluded the footage was authentic, though none could explain what it showed. As investigators struggled to reconcile these impossibilities, the situation at Kyiv Central Hospital reached a crisis point. At exactly 3:17 in the morning, the same time shown on the recovered baby monitor footage, all power to the pediatric intensive care unit failed. Backup generators inexplicably malfunctioned. For exactly 6 minutes, the ward was plunged into complete darkness. When emergency lighting finally activated, medical staff made a horrifying discovery. Baby Nikolai's bed was empty. Initial fears of abduction were quickly replaced by something far more inexplicable. Following what they described as whispers coming from inside the wall, staff discovered the infant had somehow been sealed within the hospital wall. Not behind drywall or in a crawlspace, but impossibly embedded within the solid concrete structure itself. Dr. Petrov, who had been called to the scene, suffered an immediate psychological breakdown upon witnessing what came next. As demolition crews carefully broke through the wall, they found baby Nikolai not only alive, but apparently unharmed, and clutching not 1, but 7 World War II-era dog tags, each belonging to soldiers who had died protecting children in various conflicts across Ukraine. None of these tags had been anywhere near the hospital prior to this incident. The baby was smiling, reported paramedic Ivan Kozlov, the only first responder who would later agree to be interviewed. Not a normal baby smile, the kind of smile that makes you afraid to turn your back. More disturbing still, the section of concrete where Nikolai had been found showed evidence of having been recently poured and set, an impossibility given the age of the hospital structure and the lack of construction materials or personnel in the ward. As word of these events spread through the hospital, 3 staff members who had direct contact with baby Nikolai reported experiencing the same recurring nightmare. They found themselves in a basement in 1943, watching helplessly as children were hidden inside a wall to protect them from approaching soldiers. In each dream, a Ukrainian sergeant placed his dog tag in the hand of the smallest child before sealing the hiding place. And in each dream, the soldiers discovered the hiding place too soon, before the concrete could fully harden. The investigation took yet another bizarre turn when researchers discovered historical records indicating that exactly 7 children had been executed alongside Sergeant Kovalenko in 1943. Each had been found in different hiding places throughout the village, all concealed within walls or sealed spaces. Most disturbing of all, historical photographs from German military archives showed each child clutching what appeared to be a dog tag at the moment of discovery. By this point, baby Nikolai had been transferred to a secure medical facility under constant observation. Multiple surveillance cameras monitored the infant 24 hours a day. Yet, even with these precautions, inexplicable events continued. Security footage would later show objects in the room, blankets, medical equipment, even furniture, moving slightly whenever the baby appeared to be sleeping. More disturbing were the shadows that seemed to gather around the crib, forming what some observers described as human-like shapes that would dissipate when anyone entered the room. 17 days into the investigation, Thomas and Svetlana Rourke were brought to the medical facility to face charges of child endangerment and attempted murder. What happened next was captured by security cameras and witnessed by 11 medical professionals and investigators. Upon seeing baby Nikolai, Thomas Rourke began screaming uncontrollably. Svetlana collapsed to her knees, pointing at the infant and repeatedly shouting in Ukrainian what roughly translates to, "Not our child." Not our child. The infant, who had not previously demonstrated any behavior beyond what would be expected of a 6-month-old, suddenly locked eyes with Thomas Rourke. Multiple witnesses reported that the room temperature dropped so dramatically that their breath became visible. 3 separate monitoring devices registered a temperature plunge from 71 degrees to 39 degrees Fahrenheit in less than 10 seconds. A physical impossibility. What happened next caused 2 security personnel to immediately resign from their positions. According to their sworn statements and corroborating video evidence, baby Nikolai spoke, not in baby babble, but in clear, distinct Ukrainian. Dr. Korj, who understood the language, would later translate the infant's words. "You were supposed to protect them too. Why didn't you protect them?" At that precise moment, the most inexplicable event of the entire case occurred. Historical researchers in Kyiv, who had been examining military records related to Sergeant Kovalenko, discovered a previously unnoticed document, a field report written 1 day after the execution of Kovalenko and the 7 children. The report, written by a German officer, noted something unusual. Despite thorough searches, we were unable to locate an 8th child reportedly hidden in the village. Local intelligence suggested Kovalenko was protecting 8 Jewish children, but only 7 were discovered. As this information was being relayed to the investigation team by phone, everyone in the room witnessed baby Nikolai smile. Not a normal infant smile, according to all present, but what Dr. Korj described as an expression of profound knowing that no child that age should be capable of. Seconds later, all 7 dog tags, which had been secured as evidence in a locked container across the room, were somehow found arranged in a perfect circle around the baby's crib. The case took its most tragic turn that evening. Despite being under suicide watch in separate holding cells, both Thomas and Svetlana Rourke were found dead at exactly 3:17 in the morning. Preliminary autopsy results indicated both had died of hypothermia, a medical impossibility given the monitored temperature of their cells and the fact that both were provided with adequate blankets and clothing. More inexplicable still, each was found clutching what appeared to be a small piece of concrete, later determined to match the chemical composition of the wall where they had abandoned baby Nikolai. Meanwhile, the infant himself continued to present medical anomalies that defied explanation. Blood tests revealed a blood type that changed daily, cycling through all known human blood groups. Cell samples taken from the child showed genetic markers consistent with Eastern European Jewish ancestry, directly contradicting initial DNA tests that had shown no such heritage. Most disturbing of all, tiny handprints would appear on the inside of windows in Nikolai's room, despite constant monitoring showing the infant never left his crib. The case reached its most bizarre phase when investigators, following a lead from historical archives, excavated the foundations of several homes in the village where Sergeant Kovalenko had died. What they discovered beneath the Rourke home sent shivers through the international human rights community. Concealed within the foundation, preserved by the unusual soil conditions, were the remains of a concrete structure that predated the house itself. A hidden room barely large enough for a single adult and several children. Among the remains, forensic teams recovered bone fragments from 7 distinct individuals, all children, carbon dated to the 1940s. But it was what they found embedded in the concrete that defied all rational explanation. Perfectly preserved within the decades-old mixture was a modern hospital identification bracelet bearing baby Nikolai's medical record number, a bracelet that had been placed on the infant only after his rescue from the Rourke home in 2022. Physical examination confirmed the bracelet had been within the concrete since it was originally poured, creating a temporal impossibility that no investigator could explain. As the investigation approached its 30th day, the team was no closer to understanding what force or phenomenon connected a World War II Ukrainian sergeant, 7 murdered children, an abandoned infant, and the concrete walls that featured so prominently in each aspect of the case. What they did know was that baby Nikolai was not developing like a normal infant. Despite his chronological age of 7 months, he displayed cognitive awareness more typical of a much older child. Medical staff reported the disturbing sensation of being evaluated whenever the baby's gaze fell upon them. The case might have remained an unsolved mystery had it not been for the arrival of 96-year-old Esther Abramovich at the medical facility where Nikolai was being held. The elderly woman had traveled from Israel after seeing news reports about the case. Through a translator, she explained that she believed she might be the 8th child, the one Sergeant Kovalenko had successfully hidden. "I was only 5 years old," she explained to investigators, her aged hands trembling as she spoke. "The sergeant put me in a space inside a wall. He gave me his dog tag and told me to hold it tight. He said it would protect me, that as long as I had it, I would survive." According to Esther, she had remained hidden for 3 days before being discovered by a sympathetic local family who kept her concealed until the area was liberated by Soviet forces. When asked why she had come forward after all these decades, Esther's response chilled everyone present. "For 79 years, I have had the same dream every night. I am back in that wall, holding the dog tag. But I am not alone. 7 other children are with me, and a baby. The sergeant tells us that we must all stay together to survive. But then I leave. I am the only one who leaves, and the others cannot escape." The investigation team was skeptical until Esther produced the item she had kept with her for nearly 8 decades, Sergeant Viktor Kovalenko's dog tag. The elderly woman placed it on the table, explaining that she had always felt guilty for surviving when the other children had not. "The sergeant told me to pass it on once I had lived a full life. He said it needed to protect others." Against all protocols and the objections of several team members, the investigators agreed to bring Esther to meet baby Nikolai. The meeting was documented by multiple cameras and witnessed by a full medical team standing by in case the elderly woman's health was compromised by the stress of the encounter. What no one anticipated was the infant's reaction to Esther's presence. Security footage shows the moment Esther entered the room. Baby Nikolai, who had been lying in his crib, immediately sat up, a motor skill well beyond his developmental stage. What happened next caused 3 cameras to malfunction simultaneously. The infant reached toward Esther with both hands. The elderly woman, moving with a suddenness that startled her medical escorts, rushed to the crib and placed Sergeant Kovalenko's original dog tag in the baby's outstretched hand. The room temperature plummeted. Medical equipment began malfunctioning. Static filled all audio recordings. Through this interference, multiple witnesses reported hearing what sounded like children's voices speaking in unison, not from the infant or Esther, but seemingly from the walls themselves. When normal function returned to the equipment approximately 40 seconds later, both the dog tag and baby Nikolai were gone. In their place was a handwritten note in what forensic experts would later confirm was the handwriting of Sergeant Viktor Kovalenko, despite the impossibility of such a match. The note, written in Ukrainian, contained just 5 words that translate to, "All 8 are finally safe now." Esther Abramovich, the last living link to this inexplicable case, passed away peacefully in her sleep that night. Investigators who entered her hotel room reported finding her with a slight smile on her face, her hand closed as if still holding the dog tag she had carried for most of her life. The case of baby Nikolai remains officially unsolved. Classified as a statistical anomaly by medical examiners and a mass delusion with physical manifestations by psychiatric consultants brought in to evaluate the dozens of witnesses. To this day, no trace of baby Nikolai has ever been found. The 7 World War II dog tags recovered from the hospital were transferred to a military museum in Kyiv, only to disappear from their locked display case 3 months later. More disturbing still are the reports from families who have since moved into homes built on the site of the former village. Multiple residents have reported hearing children's laughter emanating from inside their walls, always at 3:17 in the morning, always lasting exactly 6 minutes. Perhaps most unsettling is what Marcus Holloway, the property developer who initially discovered baby Nikolai, experienced 1 year to the day after his discovery. Returning to the site to pay his respects, Marcus found a small concrete fragment near where the false wall had been constructed. Embedded in this fragment was a modern military dog tag, his own, which he was wearing around his neck at that very moment. Medical personnel who treated Marcus for his subsequent psychological breakdown noted that despite the summer heat, his core body temperature remained inexplicably low for several days. What really happened to baby Nikolai and the 7 children murdered during World War II? Was there some inexplicable force connecting these events across nearly 8 decades? Or is there a rational explanation still waiting to be discovered? The concrete walls that feature so prominently in this case have kept their secrets, just as they have preserved the impossible physical evidence that continues to challenge our understanding of reality. Do you believe there are spaces between worlds where those who died protecting children can continue their mission beyond death? Have you ever experienced unexplainable phenomena in homes with a tragic history? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to our channel for more investigations into the darkest corners of history, where the line between documented fact and impossible horror becomes terrifyingly thin.